Welcome to Mindset Talk with me, your host, Jabu Zwane. Thank you so much for tuning in. Now, in this show, you're going to learn what are mindsets, how do mindsets form, what is the function of mindsets in our lives, and most importantly, how can you build the best mindsets to achieve the goals that you want. You're going to learn how to change your life one thought at a time. Without wasting any time, I'm very excited to introduce today's topic, which is about empathy. What is empathy, you might want to know? Before I actually answer the question, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about maybe where you're at. Let me ask you some questions. Are you somebody that people owe money and then you have difficulty actually asking them to pay you money back? Are you the type of person that when you hear someone says, listen, I have a need, I need money, I need help with this, the first thing that you hear in your mind is, how can you help? Are you the kind of person that has been accused or been told, hey, listen, man, you've got a very good heart, but you let people take advantage of you? If that is you, then you're probably what we call an empath. What is an empath, you may want to know? These are the people that have this unique ability to experience other people's emotions, to put themselves in other people's shoes. And also, these are the type of people that don't just listen to somebody talk about their problems, but actually they hear a call. They hear a call to help. They hear a call to actually do something about it. But unfortunately, this type of a person also ends up with a life that can be sometimes quite unhappy. And I want to go through that with you today. And hopefully by the time that we're done, you'll understand what it means that you're an empath, and maybe you'll receive some tools on how to manage this empathy of yours. But before I go even further into that, I want to talk to it from the point of being an African. Now, we know like down here, especially down here in South Africa, we have this word that we call Ubuntu. Kasisuthu, we call it Botu. And the idea behind it is that it's very difficult for me to feel fully human until you also are fully human. Some people say, I am because you are. But for us who grew up in this type of way of thinking, we know that it's not just about a concept, but actually it's a way of being. I can remember growing up, maybe you do, but I remember growing up in the Free State, walking sometimes long distances, going to the nearby farms. And when you get to the nearby farm after a long day's walk, you greet everybody, they welcome you, and then the first thing that they do would give you this, mutoho, which is like this cold maize. They call it soft porridge these days. It's kept somewhere in this house in the corner somewhere. And the interesting thing about it is that you don't get asked whether you're thirsty or not. Whether people know you or not, they'll offer you this. And after some time, they'll offer you food. And something very, very important is that you can't say no to the food. And secondly, they're not going to ask you if you are hungry. Back in the day when I was growing that time, we understood a couple of things. We understood that if somebody asks you if you're hungry or not, they're expressing some hesitation about giving you food. And actually that was also a sign that, maybe they're not as generous, or maybe they're not so keen on giving you food. But second as well, if you say no, it's more than just saying that I'm full, but it's almost like a rejection of their humanity, of the expression of love and care for you as a human being. And therefore, this was, when I think about it, especially now that I live up here in the city, it is quite interesting because here in the city, people don't ask you if you're hungry. In fact, they're not going to offer you food. And more than anything, somebody can just eat and finish their fruit in front of you without even saying anything to you. Quite an interesting thing that I had to get used to the first time I came to Joburg. And that is basically part of what, being Umuntu or Ubuntu is, especially for us who grew up in the villages. But it's also quite interesting that very same way of growing up in an environment where you had to think more about the people around you more than you thought about yourself presents some very interesting challenges. At this moment, I work as a coach. I work predominantly with corporates, and I work a lot with executives that are having some struggles with speaking up for themselves in the workplace, with speaking up for the work that they've done, with asking for the best deal for themselves, often complaining that they're being underpaid, they're also being overworked, and they seem to really not enjoy work, not because they're not good at it, but simply because they're not able to negotiate a better deal for themselves. And I think most of the time when I sit down and talk to people, we go back and we realize that a lot of this comes back or goes back into how we were raised. And I find that quite fascinating as an African, that a lot of people in our community who are super talented, who are highly skilled, who are hardworking, by the way, don't always have the greatest of success, or at least their bank account doesn't reflect the level of genius, the level of skill that they have. But at the very same time as well, when I look at Africa as a continent, we are the richest continent. We've got some of the most talented people on the continent. There's so much that the world gets from us, but at the very same time, our continent also reflects that very same reality, and a reality of not getting the best out of the best of your talent. And that's my question to you today. When you look at your level of skill, when you look at the quality of your work, when you look at the amount of work that you do, is that reflected in your success? Is that reflected in how much money you earn? Is it reflected even in the positions of power or of authority that you have in at work or even in business? And if your answer to those questions is no, then the likelihood is that you are an empath. And an empath, these are people that really care so much about other people. They do their best to make sure that people don't feel undervalued, don't feel undermined, don't feel shamed, don't feel taken advantage of. They care so much about the well-being of other people that most of the time that they put their well-being last. They'll sacrifice themselves so that others may be able to succeed. But the unfortunate part of that is that they also do train the environment, or rather they do groom people in the environment to treat them the way that they treat themselves. So when people realize this, when people realize that you don't treat yourself as well as you actually should, they're more than willing to treat you the way that you treat yourself. So if you undermine yourself, if you don't value your assets, if you just give away your talents, give away your assets, give away your resources, give away your time without any boundaries, many people are ever so willing to also take as you give away. And I often think of this, that because sometimes life is so hard, people are looking for easy. All right, life is so hard, people are looking for easy. And if you are the easy target, they're going to target you. You're going to be the person that they're going to be taking away from. And I would like to take you guys through, the different types of empaths and how do they behave in different situations and what you can be able to do to manage your empathy. Because what is important for us to understand is this: if you don't understand yourself, you cannot manage yourself. If you can't manage yourself, you cannot lead yourself. And if you cannot lead yourself, you are unable to achieve your goals. You must always think about yourself maybe as, let's say a tool or an instrument. Think about it. If you've got a very useful tool in your hands, but you don't understand how this tool works, it's not going to serve you. It may be the best tool in the world, but as long as you don't understand how it works and you can't use it, it can't serve you. And there's so many of us who are so incredibly gifted, who are so incredibly talented, but because we don't really fully understand how we are as people, we often find ourselves in situations where we're getting exploited and where we're getting the worst end of the deal. So, in coming to talk about empathy, there are different types of empaths. In one of these books that I've written recently, I talk about 10 different types of empaths. And the one that most of us know the most is actually what we call an optimistic empath. And these are people that are positive. They're positive about life, they're positive about people, and they're positive about helping people. Remember something about empathy. Empathy is about serving other people because of you see them as valuable. And at some point, I'll talk about the difference between people pleasing and empathy, because those are two different things. Sometimes empathy may show itself as if it's people pleasing, but the two are very, very different. The main difference between the two is the fact that an empath is not going to go out of their way. They're not going to throw you under the bus when things are tough. On the other hand, a people pleaser who's trying to get something from maybe a boss that they like, or from a parent that they like, or for whoever it is that they feel is more important than you, they can throw you under the bus within a second. But instead, actually, on the other hand, an empath would actually stand up for you and even fight a boss if they have to make sure that you are feeling valued, and because it's all about your intrinsic worth as a human being. So an optimistic empath, these are the people that, you might know them. They're very positive. Whenever you talk to them about anything, yeah, of course, everything's going to work out, especially if they're Christian. They're going to be quoting those verses. Romans 8:28, all things work together for good. Jeremiah 29:11, oh, I know the plans that I have for you. They're there to make you prosper and to give you an expected end. They have you the positive affirmations every day about how, hey, things are going to work out this way, things are going to work out that way. But more than that, though, these are the people that believe so much in people almost to their own hurt. These are the people that believe so much that people can be good or people are inherently good that they ignore red flags. So if somebody comes and says, listen, I've got a plan, I've come across this investment plan, and you put in 100 Rand and it can be 10,000 Rands within 10 days. The optimistic empath more likely would believe, hey, listen, this person cannot lie to me. People are inherently good. So if they're coming and telling me this is the truth about this particular investment, I'm going to put my 10 Rand in there and I'm going to be expected to get my 10,000 Rands within 10 days. And the worst part about it is that even after 10 days, if the money does not come and the person still has some excuses because they are optimistic, they will continue to believe the lies, they'll continue to believe in the schemes, which unfortunately in the end means that an optimistic empath, in other words, a highly positive person that has a good heart, that believes the best about people, becomes a highly scammable person. Their empathy almost leads them into what? Into naivety, into gullibility, and then they end up with the same patterns of behavior every single time that they've got to make some decisions. They believe too much of the positive, ignore the negative. And in relationships, an optimistic empath is the type of person that will believe the best about the person that is targeting them. Let's say that is a goal, and a guy comes, and the guy's got stories, and they've got a sad story. Sad story is being used, of course, to hook and to get into the empathy. The lady buys it, or the guy buys it, because naturally empaths are rescuers. They want to step into the situation and they want to save somebody, So when they hear a sad story, when they hear a story about somebody that needs money, they hear a sad story about somebody that needs healing because they got hurt when they were young, they were neglected by their parents, they were abused by their uncle, they were betrayed by the first partner. The empathy in them draws out, or rather that story draws out the empathy, especially the healing aspect inside of them. And they want to come into the play and they want to heal and to want to make the person feel better. But unfortunately, what ends up happening most of the time, if they're an optimistic empath, is that they don't pick out the inconsistencies in the story. They don't pick out the exaggerations in the story. In fact, when they hear the exaggerated elements of the story, it draws out the empathy even more. And that's why you find that sometimes as a lady or even as a guy, you end up with the same type of partner. They may have a different name, they may have a different height, They may look different in terms of their face, but as far as the patterns of behavior, you end up with the same. Because if you've got a tendency, for example, of constantly ignoring red flags, the ultimate end of that is that you end up with the same type of abusive people. Is that you? In terms of your history of your relationships, when you look at, maybe there was a Joe here, there was a Tabo over there, and then there was a Temba over there, or there was a Tembi and a Nandi or an Ann over there. How different are they in terms of the personality? Or are you seeing some kind of a trend? Because unfortunately, if you don't take time as a person to look at how do I make my decisions, you won't even pick out that you have a tendency to ignore red flags. I often joke and say, the thing about empaths is that when they hear the worst kind of story, they can hear that this person is abusive and they tend to be violent and they tend to make rather wrong decisions. But the moment they hear some redemptive story about that, oh, but they were neglected by their mother. Oh, but they were hurt by this person. They're like, that's why. And then they go into that mode where they're thinking, you know what, if only I can love this person right, if only I can do right by them, if only I can be softer, if only I can be kinder, if only I can give them a bit more love than what they received, perhaps their behavior is going to change. So there's almost that exaggerated hyper belief in people's ability to change when they are put in the right circumstances. Although that can happen, but unfortunately in some cases, that doesn't really happen. And that's why then you end up with the same type of person. And as an optimistic empath, you tend to have an exaggerated, unrealistic, positive outlook. I suppose in psychology they call that toxic positivity. And toxic positivity is the type of person that does not want to entertain and does not take into consideration or does not take in any negativity. And the normal language is that of, you know what, everything happens for a reason. Things are going to work out. Don't worry, don't cry too much. There's a dismissal almost of anything negative. And I want to make it a very clear distinction that this is different from somebody having, let's say, faith that things are going to work out. One can the person that has faith does not always ignore the negative aspects. They can see the negative aspect of things. They can consider those negative aspects of things and still foresee an ability to overcome that. Whereas on the other hand, a toxically positive person is the type of person that doesn't even want to say anything negative at all, because they believe that if I say anything negative or if I see anything negative, then it somehow stresses you out. It makes you feel like it creates some kind of stress for you. And that's why you find that people that have toxic positivity don't look at red flags. But we all know in the world today that not everybody is safe. Not everybody is who they say that they are. Not everybody has what they say they've got. Not everybody is going to do what they say they're going to do. But unfortunately, when somebody is toxically positive because they are an optimistic empath, they find themselves a lot of times in trouble. So my question to you to see whether or not this is you. Do you have anybody that owes you money and you have not asked them to pay you back and you have difficulty asking them to pay you back? And they come back again and they ask you for more money and they spin your story and then you give them money again. And the next time they've got an even more sad story. They don't mention anything about the other 2 times that they've taken money away from you and they take it again and you give it to them again. Are you the type of person that maybe at this point in your life, you're tired? You're tired of people coming and taking things away from you. You're tired that you seem to be always there for people, But when you need for someone to be there for you, there's absolutely no one there. That everybody calls you a friend. But when you sit, oftentimes you are alone. You're by yourself. There isn't one particular person or even two people or three people that you can call these people friends. That if you were to be in trouble today, if you were to have some kind of chronic illness, if you were to need for someone to be there for you to help you out because maybe you got injured, that actually there wouldn't be anybody there. But at the same time though, everyone knows that you can be there for them. And you were the first person for them to call. And the worst part about it is this. If you were to say no, they will try to shame you. And maybe if you're a Christian, they'll say to you, aren't you a Christian? Aren't you an elder sister? Aren't you the elder's brother? Aren't you this? Did you not promise that? Promise that? And that's the thing that we need to understand about empathy is that if we don't manage it well, it can actually create a lot of harm for us. So the optimistic empath has an overly exaggerated positive outlook on life, positive outlook on people, ignores red flags, sets themselves up to be vulnerable, to be naive, and of course, highly, highly, highly scammable. You see, the optimistic empaths are the types that those scammers target. And there's almost like an energy that you give off. But we'll talk a little bit about that. How do they target you? The second type of an empath is an emotional empath. Emotional empath. Now, if you are an emotional empath, you are the type of person that when people talk to you and they tell you the problems, or even when you go into spaces, you take on the emotions. Like literally, whenever you hear a sad story, it affects you so much that you literally almost take off the emotions from the other person and they become yours. You get very easily overwhelmed by emotional energy. So even when you go, let's say you're going for functions at home or at work, let's say even at home, especially where they are, in our culture, mekete, so, or whatever the case might be. When you are there, there's an overwhelm, especially if maybe there's struggle, people are struggling, or maybe there's pain. You get overwhelmed by people's emotions to the point that sometimes you don't even feel like going to those places. That you just want to be alone by yourself. You need to recuperate. And you know that you are an emotional empath when all or most of your friends call you when they need to talk about their emotional struggles. If somebody got dumped, they'll call you. If they're going through some kind of emotional struggle at work, they'll call you. If they're having some issue with their mother or their father, they'll call you. And you'll find that a lot of the times they call you whenever they're experiencing some emotional situation. And it may even be a positive thing, because emotional empaths are good listeners. And they create a safe psychological space for their friends, for their family. And everybody knows that this person, if I am excited, if I need to be celebrated, if I've achieved something amazing, I'm going to call them. And if I call them, they're going to be genuinely happy for me. They're not going to be jealous. They're not going to be envious. They're not going to have a side comment. They're not going to try to downplay my achievement. And in fact, they might even go as far as to say, listen, let's go celebrate because you've done something amazing. But also transversely or conversely, what happens is that if a person is going through a hard time, they call you. But at the very same time, you're an emotional empath when you don't want to talk to people about your problems because you don't want to what? You don't want to impose it. You don't want to impose the problem because you feel like you can handle it. It's easy for you to take people's problems. but it's very hard for you to talk to people about your problems. And so whenever you're going through something very difficult, you tend to then isolate, spend a bit more time by yourself if you're a Christian with God, or if you're a reader, you're reading, or you're doing whatever it is that you do to soothe yourself, to calm yourself down until you're okay again. Because you know the burden of emotions, you take it away from people, but at the very same time, you take on their burdens. But there's a time though, as time progresses, where this begins to get to you. It starts to get to you and you're like, you know what? How come nobody's there for me? You start to feel that loneliness. When you're trying to celebrate something positive has happened in your life, you got that promotion, you bought that new car, you're going through something incredible, but you don't really have anybody to share that with. And that is because very likely that you are an emotional empath. And the thing about empathy that we need to understand is that empaths do not like to impose. In fact, this whole word of imposition for them is a huge word. And they're always trying to take other people's problems from other people. They almost have this messianic or this savior complex. And on this past Saturday, actually, I was doing an event and I was sharing with the audience that as an empath, it's important to know that you are not called to save people, but rather to serve. And there's a difference. Service is that when you're tired, you're tired. Saving is committing your entire life. And until the person is safe, then your work is not done. But serving, on the other hand, is purpose-driven, is task-driven, is capacity-driven. If you don't have the time, you don't have the time. If you don't have the money, you don't have the money. You don't have to go and borrow money from Mashonisa or from the bank to help someone out financially. The mere fact that you don't have the money means that you should be able to say no. But you see, the unfortunate part about an empath is that you will think, oh, okay, but I've got a good credit. Let me go get a loan for them. And the worst part about that is that when you are being targeted by, which we'll talk about, the people that have this antipathic behavior, they will ask you to go take a loan. They'll ask you to buy a car in your name. They'll ask you to buy a house in your name. They'll ask you to get them a cell phone in your name, cell phone contract in your name. They'll spin some story on you because they know you're going to fall for it. They know that you're going to sacrifice yourself for their convenience or for their well-being. And the last thing I want to say about an emotional empath is that the way that we need to manage that is, again, taking time out and sitting back and looking at your patterns of behavior. Who is in your life? What type of people are in your life? Do you have anybody that gives to you more than they receive from you? Do you have anybody to go talk to if you are going through trouble? If the whole world is coming to you, where do you go to when you need assistance? And if you're finding difficulty answering these questions, or they're making you sad, they make you feel like you want to cry, they are, to you when you're hearing them, is exposing the unfairness of life, I want to also put it to you that you can do something about it, and you don't have to be a victim of your emotional empathy. It's a superpower. Yes, it helps you to support people, to care for people, to listen to their problems, to create a safe space. A typical emotional empath would probably become a counselor, or become even a psychologist, or become one of those people, in a church environment, in a community that everybody comes to come and get counsel. But there's a point where this becomes too much, and you need to learn to take time out. You need to learn to manage how people access you. Once you've heard your 2 or 3 stories per day, maybe it's time to switch off the phone. Maybe it's time to go and take some time to go take a rest. But unless you're trained as a professional to handle people's problems, do not become the village psychologist or don't become the village counselor, because that requires skills on how to manage that. You're a good person, but your goodness should not also mean or end with you being in a hospital, being depressed and feeling resentful and bitter because nobody's there for you. So I find this topic quite fascinating because I grew up most of my life. I grew up as an empath. When you're an empathic child, this is what happens. When you experience, like, let's say, bullying or any kind of pain, rejection growing up, there's a thing in the back of your mind that says, if only I can be good, if only I can show them how kind I am, how nice I am, that I'm not whatever they think I am. And then you grow up just serving other kids and serving everybody in the home. People are not going to wash the dishes because they know you're going to wash the dishes. People are not going to cook because they know you're going to cook. People are going to clean the house because they know that you're going to clean the house. And for you, it becomes an opportunity to show people that actually I'm not a mean person. And it's important here to realize that it's not about I'm trying to please people, but I'm trying to show people that I am not dangerous. I'm not harmful. I remember when my mother was not around, my father was not around, and as a young boy growing up in that type of environment, there's a lot of neglect, let me say. And oftentimes you get falsely accused. You get falsely accused of stealing, get falsely accused of, like finishing the food. I think it was one of the most painful things for me. Whenever the food was finished, they'll be like, because I grew up as Jabu Zwane with Basotho, right? And in the Basotho area. So they'll be like, and I'm not even close. I'll point to this dark, Xhosa person, and apparently this is the one that would have done something because the parent is not around, the mother's not around. And then you grow up with this thing of thinking, but I'm not dangerous. I'm not a terrible person. I need to do all of these good things to show them that I'm not a bad person so that they'll stop being afraid of me. And that is different from trying to please people so that they can like you. It wasn't so much that I wanted people to like me. And I think that's very, very important to get about empathy, is that an empath will do the right thing even if nobody likes them. They'll do the right thing. A people pleaser does things because they are wanting to be liked. So like is not the motivation for an empath. Service, kindness, compassion, caring, what do you call it? Caring. That's the objective here. Not so much people pleasing. And there's a point where you got to learn that sometimes it does not matter how much care you show a person, how much you love a person, how much goodness you show them. If a person is determined to believe whatever they want to believe about you, they will always find a way. They'll always find fault. They'll always find a reason not to believe whatever it is that you're showing. People don't change if they don't want to change. As much as sometimes we think that we are changing the world, people are changing because they're ready to change. People change because they want to change. And those who don't want to change are not going to change, no matter how much you think your goodness is going to convert them. As a matter of fact, some people, when they see you being that kind, that good, they see that as a weakness. They see that as an opportunity to take advantage of you. That's why they'll always have some kind of a sad story to hook and to take advantage of your goodness. And so it's important to get that. that is not you. And I think, especially if you grew up as an empath that didn't have a lot of love, and this is, I think, where I want to sort of find my way out of today's episode. There's a video that I saw online of this actress. I can't remember, I don't know her name, but she took a video of her mother yelling, talking to her. I don't know, she was saying something in course. But looking at the comments, it sounded like the mother was making up things and that she didn't do and threatening to take her to the police, whatever the case might be. But anyway, it made me think of how many times I sit in a counseling session with people that cry and complain about parents that didn't love them. Like, my mother didn't love me, my father didn't love me, and, I am the way that I am because I didn't love them. I keep on sending them money at home, they still don't love me. I've built them a house, they don't love me. I've bought them a car, they don't love me. All the other kids that don't do anything for them, they seem to get away with everything, but how come they don't love me? And it's painful, and it is sad. But a question that I always ask is, okay, fine, let's say today they decide to love you. Now what? After all those years, and they come and they say to you, listen, my child, I'm sorry, I'm going to love you. Now what? Are you ready for that love? Are you ready for that love? Do you know how to be loved? If all your life you spent being loved incorrectly, do you know how to be loved correctly? Are you ready to receive that love that you're crying for? Instead, what I've seen is this. Say a parent or whoever it is repents. And now the person is like, oh, now you're deciding to love me. After all those years of not loving me, now you're deciding to love me. Why now? Is it because I have money now? Is it because I'm working now? Is it because I'm older now? Because the truth of the matter is that we have to heal for ourselves, not for other people. And our healing will never come from somebody else initiating anything to us. But we have to heal. And it's only when we are in that heal space, especially as an empath, that we can be set free from wanting to be even more, what do I call it? More kind now, more generous, more giving. Because the other situation I've seen many times actually is the situation where, let's say the parent does decide to ask for forgiveness and now they're kind to you again. Now you as an empathic child, you're so happy that, oh, my mother, my father has apologized. You go into the extra drive of you go into hyper empathy. Now you're giving more. Now you're serving more. Now you are almost going into the borderline of becoming a people pleaser, trying to please the parents because now they've decided, hey, you're good enough now. And the reality of it is that you need to take the time to heal from the pain that you may have incurred, even as an empathic child. And then set yourself free from whatever trauma that you've gone through in your life. Because then if you don't, you're going to find yourself in that similar type of situation where, honestly, taking a video of an old person and putting it on old social media, I get it if you record it for the sake of, in case this person goes to the police and I can protect myself. But when you put it online for all to see, what does that attain? Healing comes from within, and healing is a very personal, intimate, deep journey that you're going to go through on your own. Because if you don't, you're going to end up doing things that misrepresent your character, that ends up actually with you now being in the firing line, even though you're the one that has been offended, even though you're the one that has been done wrong, because the way that you've responded to that pain is not in a mature way, or is not in a way that helps your case. And instead, it makes you look and come across in a very, very, very bad light. So if it so happens that you are the empathic child, an empathic child, especially if you had an empathic parents would oftentimes extend their empathy through the empathic child. What does that mean? It means that you end up becoming a co-parent in the home because you're the one who's obedient, you're the one who listens, you're the one who does the right thing in the home, while the other kids don't. And because maybe the parent feels and experiences the other children as being difficult, they avoid asking them to do tasks, asking them to do chores in the home, and they over-rely on you. They over-rely on you to do more, over-rely on you almost to co-parent. And then you find that now, because of that, as an adult, you may have developed some philosophies. You don't want to get married. You don't want to have children. You don't want everything that you received through the experience of being an empathic child, also being raised by an empathic parent. Perhaps you also had siblings who were not as sensitive, who were not as caring, who were not as helpful as you were. And now when you think about family, you're like, I want none of that. In fact, this past December, maybe you're one of those that even decided not to go home. You decided not to visit. Or maybe the thought has crossed your mind many times that I don't want to go home to go see them, to go visit them. Because every time you get there, you know that it's going to take a lot from you. A lot is going to be required from you to give. And unless you do something about whatever needs that there are there, nothing gets done. And because of your heart, you are unable to not do anything about it. And come January, your account is like, what happened? What happened to the bonus? What happened to money that you received in December? And I suppose with understanding, and as we go through the different episodes of this empathy, it is both exciting and sad at the same time. Because you see that I've been in that space where I became resentful, I became a little bit bitter, and I became quite judgmental. And I saw that I started taking on a persona that was very much contrary to me as a Christian, contrary to me as an African, as a person that embraces Ubuntu, but also embraces the idea of unconditional love as a Christian. But I realized that at some point I needed to learn truth as a boundary. I needed to learn justice as a boundary. I needed to learn saying no, or at least pausing my yes, not saying no, not saying yes immediately, not saying no immediately, but taking my time to go and think about whether I want to say this yes or not. And then come back and give a response. Once I've looked at my money, once I've looked at my time, once I've looked at my energy, whether I've got enough energy or not, once if I've got the skills, or even if I want to, if I've got the desire to even do some of the things that my friends, my family, whoever it is asking me to do, or colleagues at work. Because unfortunately, with a lot of us empaths, or a lot of empaths, is that you almost feel a certain sense of urgency when you hear a need being put in front of you, and you almost want to act immediately. And acting immediately most of the time means that you act without looking at your capacity to do what you're going to do, and you end up overcommitting yourself, overstretching yourself. You end up depleting your resources, depleting your energy. And you can find yourself at some point in your life really constantly being tired. And not knowing why. So I hope today's session somehow was able to give you some light. We spoke about optimistic empath and emotional empath. There's still 8 more to go through that we can go through for the rest of the episodes that are coming up. What stood out for you? What made sense to you? What connected to you? Do you have any questions? You can drop them down there, down below, and I'll be able to respond to you at some point. But my name is Jabu Zwane. Thank you so much for tuning into Mindset Talk today. Again, Mindset Talk is a show that talks about what mindsets are, how do they form, what is the function of mindsets in our lives, and how can you best create the types of mindsets to achieve your goals and to build the life that you want to build, changing your life one thought at a time. I want to say great thanks to the sponsor of the show, Arise Studios, over here in Randburg. You guys are doing the Lord's work. Really, really want to say my gratitude and thank you so much for this opportunity to be here. Cheers.